Morning. Welcome to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority Programs and Contracts Committee. Today is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. This meeting is being recorded. Commissioner Graves, Commissioner Gruhl, Commissioner Saunders, we have quorum.
Why don't we get started with acceptance of the minutes? And we shall accept them. Okay, let's go on to item number 2, program report. Nathaniel?
No, it's not on. Is the mic? There we go. Good morning, Commissioners. Nathaniel Vergao, Deputy Chief Program Officer here at LAHSA, to give the CPO report for today. So I will start with our emergency response program activation. Because of the significant rain that we had on Tuesday, the city and the county both decided to allocate motel vouchers to be able to assist outreach and 211 with being able to offer accommodations to folks who would be impacted, with a specific focus on areas most likely to be impacted by flooding. The activation period has been from October 13th through October 15th, with exits scheduled for October 16th, so through tonight. Yes, through tonight. I wasn't sure what the date was today. In total, the city activated 50 vouchers, 25 allocated to outreach teams and 25 allocated to 211. And the county activated 100 vouchers, with 25 activated for outreach and 75 activated for 211. Just as a reminder to anybody who is listening online, who may be impacted by events like this in the future, calling 211 when there is a significant weather event is likely the best way to access a motel voucher. So I just want to share that with the community. Moving on to our, I don't think your mic is working.
Okay, sorry. So there's a turn on button that I'm missing. Okay. She's gonna turn on that one. How many people I know it's only 2 nights, but do we have a large participation?
I haven't gotten the data yet. I can bring that back next month. We usually get that because it's for the outreach teams, they refer folks, but the actual utilization we get from the motels. So it's a retroactive information that we get. And 211 is even a little bit more delayed than that. But by next month, I can bring back the details.
Great. That'd be great. Because I think, and we've talked about this before, a decade ago, cold wet weather shelters, however we called them then, highly utilized and diminished over years. And I'm curious as that goes forward, kind of where the prioritization of people are utilizing.
Yeah, I don't think you were here for last month's meeting. As I shared with last month's meeting, we had an activation the prior month, and so I shared the utilization, and we did end up utilizing all of the vouchers in that activation.
Yeah. I'm a new member of this committee.
Yes.
Today, so
We are glad you're here.
Okay. So moving on to interim housing. So I know we've talked about this in several different forums, but for our interim housing portfolio, we've been working on an interim housing bed inventory that allows us to track utilization from night by night. Beginning at the beginning of the fiscal year, we instituted a new practice with providers around how we utilize that platform to be able to schedule intakes. We rolled out recently also a feature with Calendly so that outreach workers or other staff who are working with participants can immediately go into Calendly to book their intake appointment rather than having to play a game of tag by phone with providers to make that happen. We have had some rollout challenges with the inventory module as a whole, and our interim housing team and data management team have been working daily with our vendor. It was really the challenge was with our vendor. They didn't do as much beta testing as we would have expected. BitFocus, it's our HMIS vendor. But we've been working hand in glove with them to get this resolved. We feel like at this point, based on work over the last couple of weeks, that the enhancements are impactful, and so we're seeing significant improvements in that module and its functionality. And so we really at this point are working with providers to get them back on board with the process. Having experienced some glitches, it seems to be working well now, and so it's really about reinforcing with the providers that it is working and how to make sure that it continues to work by through collaboration with them. I will report that despite the challenges with the technology, our interim housing is at 95% occupancy, excluding beds that are empty but have a reservation for an intake. So as of 2 days ago, this is data from 2 days ago, I believe, it was 95% occupancy. For permanent housing, you'll hear a report on our efforts around TLS ramp down from Sarah Kinslow later in the agenda, so I'll skip that for now. I did want to touch on housing navigation. We are working with the county, which is the primary funder for housing navigation outside of our federal resources. I'll talk a little bit later also about work around KPIs, but specifically around housing navigation, because we've got a pause on enrollments in time-limited subsidy, which has really limited the need for housing navigation, yet we were funded for the service. So we've been working with the county and the city on what should that look like then, since we don't have TLS resources to work to connect people to. So we've been working with the city and the county and providers. Right now, the primary focus of Housing Navigators is working with participants in shelter and outreach that have been connected to vouchers, either project-based PSH or tenant-based vouchers, to help them navigate through that process. And for those who have a tenant-based voucher, also to do unit location. But we are looking at beyond that, the capacity and how it can be used in terms of providing additional case management at shelters, so that we're utilizing that resource to its fullest during this year. We expect that there will be a significant change in what navigation looks like next year with programs transitioning to the county. We are.
I'm sorry, being the new kid back here on the block. And on the TLS, could you just refresh my memory on the chain, like how much we lost or how that is being impacted on the TLS, just briefly?
So we are expecting, sorry, I should have these. I've said them so many times, I should have them memorized, but I don't.
That's right. Just generally, I mean,
Sarah, the 3,000.
just my memory is not on.
We're ramping down as approximately 3,000 slots of time-limited subsidy during this fiscal year. So we worked with the county at the beginning of the fiscal year. They invested, I believe it was $47 million across youth, families, and single adults for time-limited subsidies. That is expected this year. That is serving as our baseline target to get to for next year is just the number of slots that are covered by that $47 million. The additional slots that are funded during this fiscal year are through our COC HAP dollars, which we don't expect to be receiving COC HAP dollars for next fiscal year because we're already spending HAP 6. HAP 7 was not allocated in the state's budget this year. So if they do a HAP 7, we don't expect to receive that until 27-28 fiscal year. And it's significantly reduced at this point. They're talking about a 50% cut in the state investment in HAP funding.
1,000 slots were funded previously, but I'm just kind of, as we're, reason I'm asking that part of these questions is continued homelessness still seems to be a challenge. And so, and all of a sudden when we see changes on the street or other things, I want to make sure that people understand why that's happening. So could you explain again? So those 3,000 TLS were funded, how was it, city and county, or?
So as I said, the majority of those were funded by our COC HAP dollars. There was also a significant investment in TLS from the state through HSP dollars through DPSS. that the HSP funding received a significant increase during COVID. That was I believe it was a 3-year increase. We were able to carry over some of that into this fiscal year. So it's a loss of state funding, both from HAP and through DPSS HSP funding. Additionally, the city is funding TLS, but they are transitioning from their roadmap agreement to their alliance agreement. And so for next fiscal year, they want their investment to be for all new participants so that they can meet their alliance agreements. So we are ramping down all of the slots funded by the city during this fiscal year as well. There will be investment from the city for next fiscal year, but the goal is to have that be all new participants funded for next fiscal year.
So I don't want to recreate the wheel, but is there something that kind of shows that? So let's just, that says, here's where we were, here's why, here's the numbers, just so that as we're asked, why are there less TLS? It's an easy kind of cheat sheet, so to speak.
Yeah, I've done multiple presentations and I'm glad to share them with you. So
Thank you. That would be fabulous.
Absolutely.
Is that on the website at all?
Yes, in multiple places. I will make sure that you have the web link, but also a direct copy of those presentations.
Okay, great. And those are great questions.
Yeah. We're looking at, across the board, massive reductions in available funding, between the loss of HAP funding, for not having any HAP 7 across the county. If we do get a HAP 7 at 50%, I believe that's close to $175 to $200 million that the county, all the entities in the county collectively will have lost. Measure A, it's fantastic that it passed, but all of the increased funding goes to permanent housing development, affordable housing development, and prevention, and local solution funds. It does not increase the pot of money going to homeless services. Essentially the pot of money didn't grow from Measure H to Measure A for homeless services. And we've seen significant cost increases in programs, with expansions of ICMS for new permanent supportive housing buildings that are coming online, and the rate increase that was necessary for shelter beds that was paid for this year out of one-time funding by the county, but will need to come out of Measure A. Additionally, there was a provision in Measure A that requires that nonprofit agencies are able to pay their staff at the same level that it would be funded at a county agency. So we're going to see significant costs across all programs for next fiscal year. So the last estimate that I had heard from the county was that they're facing a structural deficit of approximately $300 million for Measure A.
So I think just as the change is happening with LAHSA changes, city change, county changes, that it'll be easy for people to have a narrative of, oh, it's just this or that, or it's so-and-so's fault. And I just think it's really clear for transparency for public policymakers and the public to understand, here's why these things are happening, or here's at least I don't know, it's just a factual as to where the money is or is not, and where the responsibility is, I think is really going to be critical. And you kind of have to say it 10 times. I know I need to hear it 10 times to know exactly, okay, this is why this is happening. And because there was the increase in the bed rate, there was some of these other things that are rightly needed to happen. And I think also for, permanent housing was really important in prevention, so that we have throughput, because that's also the challenge where there's nowhere for them to go. So the whole idea hopefully is that you don't have to increase the number of homeless services because people are moving out. So I think that was the concept, but I really think a great cheat sheet would be great on that.
The presentation that I referenced is one that I've given in multiple spaces that really is system-wide impacts on our funding crisis. And really the decrease in availability of TLS resources for next fiscal year is impacting the entirety of the system, because that has been one of the primary outputs from the system into permanent housing. We've designed the system so that TLS could be utilized for anybody, regardless of their acuity. And so that as soon as somebody can find a unit that they could rent, we could get them into that unit and support them with case management and rental supports, and assess whether or not they were in need of longer term assistance through permanent supportive housing, and then make that transition to permanent supportive housing from TLS. So we've got a lot of folks in TLS, and again, Sarah will get into some of the details of this later. We have a lot of folks in time limited subsidies who are in need of permanent supportive housing, but because we're not able to move new people in to TLS, the pathways out of shelter are diminished dramatically. And because we're not able to move folks out of the shelter and into permanent housing, we're not going to have new enrollments, new placements into shelter. We expect to see an increase in exits to unknown destinations from shelter as participants get frustrated with being in shelter and not getting movement and figure I'll just go back to what I knew because I'm not making progress. And so we expect to see those increases in exits to unsheltered destinations or unknown destinations, and we expect to see significant decreases in the number of people able to enter shelter this year and again next fiscal year.
And I think what's so important, what Commissioner Grill is saying, is that we need to keep telling everyone the impacts of what is happening right now with the funding, with, the HAP funding, the HAP 7. And so all the service providers know and everyone knows. So it's really clear.
Yeah, and as you'll hear later today, we are making progress with TLS and moving folks into both PSH and out of TLS into successful exits. There's still a significant amount of work to be done. And again, that is just so that we can ramp down and not have to cut people off at the end of the fiscal year. That's not that we can ramp down and refill each of those slots with new participants. And then the only other piece that I do think we need to make sure is included in this conversation always is our federal resources and how much they are in jeopardy as well. With more than 8,000, I think it's close to 9,000 units of permanent supportive housing supported by our COC funding, that if the federal government upends that, are potentially in jeopardy. So we could see thousands of people potentially lose their support for rental assistance, which would likely mean to evictions and also would make those supportive housing buildings no longer sustainable financially. And so we may see closures of those buildings or sales of those buildings and see agencies fold as a result. It's unfortunately a bleak picture. I've gotten to the point where when I walk into a meeting, people put their head down because they don't want to hear what I have to say, because it's been many presentations of that bad news. So back to my report on housing navigation. We, as I said, we are reworking that. We are working with the city and the county on the new design and new KPIs. We did adjust KPIs across the board for other programs, which I'll talk about in a second, but we held off and gave an additional 30-day pause on the KPIs for housing navigation because of the design challenges that we're facing. So onto our systems and planning department. As I just mentioned around HUD and the concerns there, the NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunities, still has not been issued by HUD. The federal government shutdown has impacted the timeline since HUD has been closed, and we don't know how close they were to releasing the NOFO. There were rumors that it was days away before the shutdown. But certainly it won't be released until the shutdown has been ended, and how long after that is unclear in terms of when they will finally release the notice funding. We are continuing to track potential impacts of the NOFO. Jessica Reed, our Associate Director of COC Planning, will share in a presentation more about the current landscape of federal COC funding at the commission meeting next week. So we'll get a much deeper dive on that next week. As I mentioned, with time limited subsidies and needing to move a significant number of folks out of time limited subsidies who need permanent supportive housing, we collectively at the CES Policy Council have been working on ensuring that we can ensure access to those resources for folks in TLS. Earlier in, I think it was during the summer, CS Policy Council had voted to prioritize transitions from TLS into tenant-based vouchers for matching for tenant-based vouchers, so that folks in TLS could transition in place and essentially swap out the funding they would be removed from the TLS funding and instead be funded through a federal voucher. And then last month, after several months of debate and exploration, the CS Policy Council did vote to update its prioritization guidelines to also prioritize folks from TLS in need of PSH for project-based PSH as well. In that vote, the Policy Council did vote to make sure that both of those changes would sunset at the end of the fiscal year unless there's a vote to continue them, but they are scheduled to sunset at the end of the fiscal year as we adjust to what funding will look like for next fiscal year. As I said, we've been working with the city and the county and providers on adjusting programmatic KPIs, and the only one not yet resolved is the housing navigation. We are currently working with data management and contracts and procurement to make sure that those new KPIs are implemented in our contracts as well as available to be appropriately tracked through HMIS, and so that providers can be tracking their progress toward KPIs on a regular basis themselves. So that is work that's ongoing. In past, I've also shared about the development of our learning pathways. We had released a learning pathway on our centralized training academy earlier this year for our interim housing. And just to describe what I mean by a learning pathway is it's literally from your first day on the job to becoming an expert at your job in interim housing, all of the things that you need to learn. So everything from soft skill knowledge, like what it is to be trauma informed and to work from a trauma informed perspective, what Housing First means, to the nuts and bolts of how should you do an assessment, how should you engage a participant in the assessment process, how do you do the data entry, all of that work all the way through. And it's broken up into modules so that as somebody new comes into a position, they can go through the entirety of the training, but it can also be used by program managers as they see challenges that a staff may be facing. They can recommend, this is a unit you should go take. So it's broken up, and so they can do discrete units or they can do the entirety of the training. As of October 8th, 345 individuals have utilized the interim housing learning path with over 1,000 trainings having been completed. So we're seeing a significant utilization of that. We are working on a similar learning pathway for time-limited subsidies. We had hoped to be able to launch that by the end of this month. The launch date is being pushed back just because of staffing challenges in terms of having sufficient staff to be able to develop it. These are really comprehensive trainings, and we want to make sure that they are well done before we roll them out. And so we are pushing that back to December. The training team is also currently developing new instructor-led training courses for CES and systems navigation, cultural humility, healthy boundaries, trauma-informed supervision, and implicit bias. And then lastly, on October 30th, our training team is meeting with the DHS Housing for Health training team to onboard them to the administration of the LA HAT tool. We've been doing significant trainings across the system. And so we're working now directly with the training team at DHS Housing for Health to help them become trainers as well. Data management. Our data management team continues to work on improvements and refinements to our data systems and dashboards. As I mentioned last month, we have now a dashboard that allows us to online be able to track the vendor by name list. It has been live and in use since late August, and in collaboration with the VA, the team continues to provide enhancements based on feedback from VA staff that are utilizing the dashboard. So we're continuing working from a continuous improvement model across the board. On October 14th, just yesterday, we launched our leadership data quality Tableau dashboard. This allows agencies to review their data quality performance and identify program areas where improvements in data quality are needed. This is really important because without good data, we can't really understand how the system is functioning. So this is an exciting development. We're continuing to monitor agencies' data quality so that our systems and planning teams can work with providers to fully utilize HMIS as they build out their programs based on the best available data. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but back to permanent housing, focus on permanent supportive housing. For new project-based buildings, we have 41 buildings that are in active lease up. Again, to make sure that you're caught up to date, I reported last month that we did have some buildings that, although they had received HAP, had passed the 90-day mark. Our goal is to be able to get to 90% occupancy by 90 days after the HAP, which is the agreement between the housing authority and the development. We had a number of buildings where we had not met that. And with each of those buildings, there were very specific reasons. One of them included that the fire inspections hadn't happened. So as we've been figuring out how to appropriately report on our progress around lease ups, we had initially focused on the certificate of occupancy and then 90 days post that. We realized over time that one of the challenges in being able to do the lease up in 90 days after the certificate of occupancy was that often there was a delay between the certificate of occupancy and the HAP agreement. And until the HAP agreement is in place, folks actually can't move in. And so we could have all the units matched, but there may be, 5, 10, 30 days of just delay in being able to move people in. And that's not an issue of losses matching and our ability to get people into the units. It's a systems issue. So we had moved to tracking based on the HAP agreement. As I reported last month, we're continuing to look at whether that is the right metric. We dove deeper into the data and realized that the vast majority of the buildings where we're experiencing delays beyond 90 days for that 90% occupancy are with home key sites. With home key buildings, most of those, the vast majority, are utilized as interim housing first, and they do piecemeal renovations on the properties. And so there is a HAP agreement for the entirety of the property, but they're only able to move in folks by blocks. And so for those home key buildings reporting on full occupancy post 90 days post the HAP agreement doesn't actually make sense because they're done piecemeal. And so it may actually be 6 months or more based on construction timelines of each of those blocks. So just wanted to give that update. We do have 20 buildings.
With the fire inspection or whatever, I think it would be helpful if you said, if we said, look, to the fire department, mayor's office, whatever, could you help us make these priorities in these locations? Here's the list, whatever it may be, that we're, kind of put at the top of the.
Yeah, we are absolutely working with all entities that can help expedite these processes. Whether it's the city around fire inspections or LACDA had some challenges around staffing and review of vouchers. So we're working collaboratively with partners on all of this. But the biggest challenge is in the manner in which we've been reporting on these home key buildings. So we're revising how we're doing the reporting so that we can exclude those from the totals and have a specific report on home key. So I just wanted to share that I had raised a concern last month. We've dived into the data and we're looking at how we can better represent the data to be able to show legitimate progress and not be distracted by the difference in typology. Okay. As I mentioned, we have been prioritizing folks from time limited subsidies for tenant-based resources. We have matched a significant number of participants already. We had COC vouchers, about approximately 340 COC vouchers that came online. We've already matched a significant number of participants to that and have had, I want to make sure I have the notes right. We have 203 participants already matched to those vouchers. 31 are in the process of voucher issuance. Another 131 of those have their UHA, the housing application certified. And so they're going through final review to get the voucher issuance. We have another 43 where the UHA has been started but not yet completed, and another 8 that have not yet started, actually 18 that have not yet started, 10 of which have not accepted the match. So we're likely to rematch those resources. So we're making good progress in terms of leasing up those vouchers. And again, these are primarily, if not exclusively, being matched to participants in TLS. And so we're not expecting long delays from voucher issuance to lease up because they're already in an apartment. So it's a matter of working with the landlord to make the transition in subsidy type. And with that, I will, oh, sorry, there's one additional update on our master leasing operations. In past reports, we'd shared regular updates on the status of master leasing. We had stopped including those updates as we reassessed the master leasing, as a result of looking at what the impact of the pause on TLS enrollments would be on master leasing. We are currently working on leasing up 110 units, and just recently had an open house at one of our buildings on Grand. We had 34 people attend, 25 completed rental applications, and 6 of those are already moving in. We are looking to move in, excuse me, all 25 of those participants. So we are making progress on the lease ups. We are also working collaboratively with the city and the county on evaluating what the future of master leasing should look like in the current fiscal climate. And I will.
What will that, as far as the master leasing from, again, we were doing lots of master leasing and then funding and other issues. What are the city and county just generally thinking about how to move forward on master leasing?
We are really in conversation right now. I wouldn't want to share thoughts because they're extremely preliminary. I think both are interested in the typology. We had great success with some of the encampment resolution efforts, being able to move, having units immediately available to be able to move folks into, both from Inside Safe operations and Pathway Home, as well as our ERF grant. We actually filled a number of our master lease buildings in a matter of days from opening, from the work that we were doing with our ERF in South LA. So there's a lot of promise, but there are also challenges in terms of overall cost, and where given where we are fiscally as a system, there is an ongoing evaluation of whether or not this is the right investment. So we'll come back with additional information. And before I end, I did just want to share one final note on the HAP funding. We did receive feedback from the state on our HAP 6 application, the collaborative application for all the entities within the county. There was very little that we needed to do in terms of amendments. However, there is one significant piece, and I'll talk about that in a second. We are meeting with the state later today to go over all of those amendments and try to get feedback from the state as to whether we expect this to be the entirety of additional feedback that they need, or if this is going to be piecemeal in terms of feedback, the way the HAP 5 application was. And that was a significant contribution to the delay of receiving funding in HAP 5. So we're hopeful to be able to get news this afternoon that this is it, but we don't know. The one significant challenge in terms of the feedback is the feedback primarily focused on our collective plan for addressing encampments. The state is requesting clarification on how the region will house individuals who are not accounted for in interim housing and permanent housing plans. Essentially, their feedback implied that they expect us to be able to give them plans for all 45,000 people who were counted in the last pit count as unsheltered. So we are, as I said, we're going to meet with the state this afternoon to try to get clarification in terms of what they are actually looking for around our planning. With our current fiscal situation, locally, state level, and federal, We don't think it's reasonable to be able to provide plans for addressing all people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. The way the grant application was written, it was to um, provide either a list of all known encampments or the zones of encampments, which we provided, but they felt like the number was not representative of the total unsheltered population. But we are also in comparing encampment data to pit count data, comparing apples to oranges. And so we're going to meet with them this afternoon to get clarification. One way or the other, we will respond and amend the application as needed by the deadline, which is the end of this month. And as I said, we hope to also get information as to whether we can expect any additional requests for amendments or additional information after that meeting, and we'll share that out. And with that, I conclude my report.
Okay, before we end, I think we have a caller waiting.
Keisha Mills, you're welcome to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak. I wanted to know, you have a lot of safe parking programs throughout Los Angeles. How many of those people in that program are you helping to house? And I also would like to know, are they a priority on your list as well? Because there's children that's living in those cars on the safe parking lot. Are you providing vouchers for those people as well? Because I know Safe Park in LA have like 9 or 11 lots. So can you please provide some of the vouchers for the people that's living in their cars, that's trying to get out of their cars as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Nathaniel, thank you for your program report. It goes without saying too, how much you do, everyone here at LASA, what you guys do. And, just getting one person off the street is just a wonderful thing. So I know all the impacts and all the funding and all the direness of what's going on. I still want to give you, like, what you do here at LASA is very, very important. So thank you very much. Okay, so let's go to agenda item number 3. Janine Lim.
Good morning, everybody. Janine Lim, Deputy CFO. I'm pinch hitting on a few items today. Item number 3, funder agreement authorizations. Item number 3 on your agenda this morning is requesting committee's approval to enter into a fiscal year 25-26 funder agreement with Los Angeles County Development Authority, LACTA. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Are we taking action on this?
Yes.
I would move approval.
A second.
Commissioner Graves,
Aye.
Commissioner Gruhl, Commissioner Saunders.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And then let's move along to item number 4.
Item number 4 on your agenda is requesting committee's approval to enter into agreements and amendments with providers and vendors for fiscal year 25-26. Happy to answer any of your questions.
Do you want to go over just the list of vendors?
Sure. Do you want to go one by one?
Sure.
Okay. First on the list is Dino's Main, funded by Measure A. We are increasing this allocation by $378K.
You can just roll through them really
Oh,
fast.
okay.
And I guess the question would be, again, first time on this committee, but I know we see him in the full commission, but so this is as meal services for the emergency response team on this one. Is this new? We didn't include it in the beginning, or we're adding more because they're serving more? So that would be great just to say why, normally how many times a year we're giving them contracts. So this one particularly.
Okay, that one I will get back to you on.
Okay.
Next on the list is Hathaway Sycamores, funded by county general funds. Funding for this will fund leasing costs for interim housing sites for transitional age youth. The allocation is increasing by 556,000. Next on the list is Housing Operations Management. This is HOME, our TLS centralization vendor. We are, the funder is City ESG Rush Funds. We are increasing this allocation by 925,000. The next is Level Blue. This is coming from our admin pool. This is LASSO's partnership with Level Blue as our managed security service provider, which will strengthen our cybersecurity through 24/7 monitoring, AI-driven threat detection, and compliance-ready solutions, enhancing efficiency, regulatory alignment, and public trust. We are increasing this allocation by 220,000.
So it looks like it's, the total funding is that 220,000? Is that, and this is security for, is it one of our operating facilities we have?
No, I don't believe it is.
Just information tech? Is there anyone from?
My understanding is it's just our cybersecurity. So it's
Okay.
security for our IT infrastructure.
Thank you.
Next is Special Services for Groups, SSG. The funder is County General Funds. This funding is for leasing costs for interim housing sites, increasing the allocation by 1.5 million. The next batch of these are funded by Measure A Local Solutions Fund for Project Home Key. This will go to Union Station. Homelessness Services, 1.5 million increase. Volunteers of America of Los Angeles, 1.6 million increase. And Weingart Center for a $2 million increase. Any questions on those?
Okay, great. You said the whole child mental health.
There's one more. There's the Whole Child Mental Health. This is funded by County General Funds with an increase of 729 million. I'm sorry, 1,000. That would be a lot.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jenny. Any questions, commissioners, or can I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Graves,
Aye.
Commissioner Gruhl,
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 5, Brian Brown.
Good morning, Brian Brown, Associate Director of Reporting and Analytics in the Data Management or Data and Analytics Department. And this is for review and approval of our staff responses to the 2025 NOFO appeals. Are the slides in the deck? Cool.
Do you want to just note Bevan's online?
Oh, yes. And sorry, yes. Bevan Kuhn, Deputy Chief of Analytics, is online. She couldn't be here in person, but she's available for questions. Thanks, sorry. So just an overview of the process. The methodology for our appeals was presented and approved by Commission on July 31st. The appeals process entails that we deliver preliminary performance evaluations to the providers. They're able to submit appeals from September 15th to September 22nd. We assess and prepare recommendations for every single appeal. And I can't remember why we phrased that last bullet point that way, but then we make our decisions or recommendations, bring them here. If they're approved here, they go to commission, and if they're approved there, they go into effect. Appeals documents that the provider receives are the preliminary score report and the formula notebook for how we reach those scores. Next slide. So this year we had 25 appeals out of 135 projects in the reviewed. This is in line with our norm. Last year it was 23 out of 134. Year before that was 21 out of 143. Most common areas included in the appeals, because there's several scoring criteria they could appeal on, or this year were serve high needs population and bed unit slot utilization. Both of those were appealed by 9 out of the 25 appeals received. I believe both of those are in line with historical items appealed. Next slide. This is a full breakdown of the different scoring criteria that they could appeal, with counts of how many of those 25 appeals appealed on that particular criteria. You will note that the two biggest were spend down and bed unit slot utilization. Those are in line with historical trends as the most appealed. The next highest are serve high need population and housing stability. Serve high need population is in line with historical trends for most appealed. Housing stability is was not previously one of the most appealed, and on review, our logic was, or our calculations were correct, but there was some concern that that metric could have outsized influence on smaller programs. So we will be reviewing the methodology and if we want to change that for future NOVOs. I think next slide. And then this is just a kind of summary total of our decisions. We recommend approving 20 of, and this is on the scoring criteria, those 41 criteria across the appeals, because a given appeal, we could approve some and deny others. So of those 41 scoring criteria, 20 were approved, 21 were denied. On average, if the recommended approvals go into effect, it would raise the average score by 10.9%. And our common reasons for approving, these are in line with historical norms, were either miscalculations due to technical errors with how the data was entered into the database, how it was submitted, anything like that, or late submissions of data corrections that just we didn't have the latest data at the time we were supposed to have it from the provider. And so when given updated data by them, it does change the calculation. Reasons for denials, again, in line with historical norms, were that our calculations are correct or an incorrect interpretation by the provider of the criteria, and we would just have to kind of explain the criteria. And I think that's really all I've got in my slides, so just open for questions now.
We have public comment on this item, but commissioners, do you have any questions before Mr. Brown leaves? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Christine Marassi, and I'm going to miss your last name here. Glasgow. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi, Christine Mirasi Glasgow, President CEO of Upward Bound House. We were one of the agencies that appealed one of the decisions. We got a favorable response, so our appeal was approved. However, there's a recommendation from staff in an email saying that we should apply for a scoring exemption. I sent an email in requesting what exactly that means and if there was a next step for us, and I didn't get any response back. So I'm here this morning to just get clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there someone here that can speak to Christine on that?
Brian Brown, Associate Director of Reporting and Analytics. That line was accidentally just included an error in several responses. Just the sentence about that additional exemption to apply for wasn't meant to be put in the template response.
Okay, but is it a response that you can send back to Christine to her email?
Yes, yeah, we could send updates to people that got that sentence to that.
Okay.
They should ignore that sentence.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, and a speaker online.
Josh DeSalle, you're welcome to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Josh DeSalle, Chief Operating Officer at the Downtown Women's Center. I had the same concern as Christine. We had a couple of appeals that were denied with that language, which as also being a COC board member, I had never seen before. I also just want to call out that historically there have been opportunities for appeal, quoting from the appeals process and form. that certain administrative factors which may have significantly affected a project's ability to perform or spend down their budget is an eligible grounds for appeal. There was no area for that in the form, and the appeals that we had denied were under that category. So it doesn't appear that we've followed the appeals process in reviewing appeals related to administrative factors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let us move on to item number. Do you want to come up and address that?
This item is a review and approve.
Oh,
item, so
okay.
there is a vote.
Okay, commissioners, could I get a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Graves,
Aye.
Commissioner Grohl,
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, great. Now let's move on to item number 6, Ms. De La Vega.
While she makes her way to the podium, I just want to say 2 quick words. Actually, not literally 2, but Kami has been working with us for the last 2 years now, maybe more. And she's been a phenomenal resource to us here at LASA, assisting with our HET teams in looking at our language capacity and how we work with folks who are not English proficient, and did some phenomenal work there. And I'm really pleased with the work that she's doing for us now more broadly around training. So I just wanted to sing her praises before she takes the mic.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel. And it's nice to see you again, Commissioner Saunders. I know that I used to present to the ad hoc committee on DEI. Yeah, so like Nathaniel said, my name is Camila de la Vega, and I am a project leader with the Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab. And I'm really excited to share some of the work that we have been doing with LASA to train the homelessness response workforce on being able to use data to make program improvements. We can go to the second slide. So a little bit about who the Government Performance Lab is for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are an applied research and technical assistance organization based at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, like I mentioned earlier. And our mission is to help governments deliver better outcomes for their communities. So we do this by working side by side with our government collaborators, implementing promising solutions, and then we help spread practices that have proven to have potential for impact. Historically, we used to have fellows like myself when I started at LASA, who were embedded in government agencies, but increasingly we are focusing more on using alternative methods for building capacity within government agencies to be able to do that work themselves. Can go to the next slide. Okay, so we've collaborated on over 140 projects with different states, cities, and counties across the US within the 3 fields that we focus on: children and families, homelessness and housing, safety and justice. And throughout all of these projects that we've had, establishing strong data-driven decision-making practices within government agencies has been at the core of all of those projects. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is about transferring those skills to establish data-driven performance management practices onto the homelessness response workforce. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so why are we doing this at the GPL? Because homelessness is a complex, urgent, and high-stakes challenge that it requires data-backed decisions to be able to iterate, to learn, and make improvements on a continual basis. But we see that there are a lot of barriers across the jurisdictions that we've worked with, including the focus tends to be with data specifically. It tends to be on compliance, not necessarily improvement. Sometimes systems are waiting for the data to be perfect in order to be able to use it. On the provider side, I think there is also the sense that data feels punitive or disconnected from the people that they are serving. And lastly, I think we've also heard a lot from different jurisdictions that there is a need for safe spaces for open learning and discussions about data. And importantly, there is a critical gap in the workforce's data skills. So For the staff that we have trained so far within LASA, which is 98 at this point, we've had 85% of folks report that they entered the field through direct service. And I think it's important to note this because for people who enter the field without already having some sort of analytical background or technical skills, there aren't a lot of pathways for them to build those skills once they are in the system. And obviously, I'm not saying people can't do this. We have people who just like learn on the fly, but they have never had the opportunity to actually dedicate themselves to gaining these skills. And 40% of people who participated in our training reported also never having taken a course that was focused on data literacy or analysis. And I think it's important to note too that the median number of years that folks had been working in the homelessness field was 7 years, saying both two things. They had been in the field for a long time and maybe not had a lot of opportunities to develop these skills, as well as I think proving the point that it matters a lot investing in these skills because people are staying. I know there is a lot of turnover, but I think that is mostly like going from agency to agency, but people tend to stay in the field. And I wanted to pull up this quote from somebody who participated in our training. So this is to a question in the pre-training survey around what do you want to accomplish with this training or what are you hoping to get out of it? And this person said, I want to feel confident making data-driven decisions, even when I don't have every single piece of data. I'd like to walk through the thought process that leads from assessing a piece of data to an actionable takeaway. And I think that highlights two important things. One, people want to know that they are making good decisions even with imperfect data, and also strengthening that movement from the data to the action. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so to give you a sense of what these workshops look like in practice, I am going to share how the time-limited subsidies workshop went. And in our discussions with LASA, including Nathaniel, Bevan, and other folks who have been advising us for a very long time since we started, we decided to focus on TLS just because, as you've already heard, there are a lot of changes happening, and I think it makes a big difference whether the staff both on the LASA side and staff on the agency, provider agency side, have the skills to really use the data to be able to make better decisions. So one of the first things that we focus on is creating this shared language. So we brought together both LASA TLS program staff and provider agencies in separate sessions to establish a common way to talk about and to use data. The workshops are also an opportunity for people to pull up and look at the big picture and see how their everyday work and the data that they track connects to broader system-wide goals and participant outcomes. In terms of data use, I think a highlight of the TLS workshop is that we were able to give staff hands-on experience with LASA's Tableau dashboards. So participants really gained confidence and practical skills that they could immediately apply in their own roles. And this was especially important for folks in the provider agencies. And I just want to note here that I think it's been my whole team, when I share back about what are the dashboards that LASA has, are so impressed because this is so advanced in comparison to so many of the other jurisdictions that we work within. And I think it's important to have a centralized, robust source of data that everybody is looking at and aligning on. And so yeah, just wanted to give kudos to LASA because they've really done amazing progress and iterated so much since I've joined. The last thing we do in these workshops, which is really important, is also prioritizing the action step. So at the end of the workshop, we spend the last session basically thinking back to what the data was showing us that we explored through the workshop, and then brainstorming potential actions for specific bottlenecks in the system that we saw. And it was really nice to get all of the responses. I wish I had to create these slides before having the provider-facing training, so I couldn't add some of the responses that they had, but I thought that their brainstorming on potential actions was brilliant. They included things like, we're gonna, set like these automatic reminders to do the housing acuity index assessment every 90 days, and the other ideas that they had for supporting folks with increasing income. So maybe at some other opportunity, I'll be able to share some of those. So this is the model that we're going to be using for future projects. We're going to be doing this again with other programs. And we can go to the next slide. So this is our timeline. We have basically been funded for 2 years for this project from July 2025 to June 2027. So we're here to stay one more time. We thought we were leaving, but I am really excited this funding came through. And before the funding kicked in, we ran this pilot workshop series with LASA and county associate directors. So I see many of you here. And that pilot was basically to help inform us around like the complexities of the system, the challenges with using data. And we got a lot of really helpful input from folks who participated in that to be able to then come up with this new model for delivering the trainings where we are focusing on one program at a time. So that we can tailor each of the trainings specifically to the challenges, the data, and the priorities in that program. And then in terms of our audience, we are focusing on both contracting agencies as well as contracted provider agencies so that we can work with both sides of the contract, which we also think is really important. One other key thing to note is that we're going to be doing some R&D on leveraging tech and AI for scaling this workshop. So how can we use the new tools that may be available to be able to teach this? Like I am one person and I have a team that sometimes can help, but I think there's a lot of potential in using tech or AI to help make this training that to be widely available for the homelessness response workforce across LA. And yeah, and then starting July 2026, we're going to be testing some of these new models as we prepare to scale the training.
And what, you may have said this, what's the funding source?
Hilton. Can go to the next slide. Thank you. We can skip this one. Sorry, these couple of slides were just to give you a sense of what we cover in the trainings. And so for this one particularly, this is just about the data-driven decision-making framework that we use and how we apply it to help folks identify problems that they want to address, plan. So be really specific about the data that they're looking for before making a data request or going on a data hunt. And then how do you analyze data to generate insights that are actionable? And then how do you use that to inform action, which is the most important step and where a lot of people tend to get stuck. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so I was really excited and relieved that the feedback that we received has been overwhelmingly positive. I think it's hard to have like a full day training with folks and then them be happy at the end. But I think so this was nice to see for me that 100% of folks reported that they increased confidence and gained new ideas for using data to improve programs. I think people also really valued the opportunity to do some peer learning. 90% said that this workshop helped them connect with and learn from peers in ways that are not available elsewhere. And again, because these slides were created before I had delivered the provider-facing training, I wanted to bring a quote that was representative of the feedback that we heard from providers. So this is in response to a survey question where I was asking what was the most valuable part of the training for you and your role. And this person said, definitely discussing the trends that we are seeing for income, housing acuity index assessments in the dashboards, as well as learning from others' responses through the activities. And the last thing I'll say here is that I think all participants rated this training as being above average, but one of the secondary things that we are testing with training and staff investments is, does this contribute to job satisfaction? And I think that there are some things that we could also just continue working on assessing, whether providing a certificate or opportunities for coaching that follow up on the training. But it was nice to see that, without being intentional about this piece, 60% of folks said that it contributed to their job satisfaction. And yeah, just to note that these responses are just from the 14 folks who participated in the LASA, TLS, and housing navigation training. And so we don't have all of the data for providers who participated in the training. We can go to the last slide. Okay, so we just wrapped up the TLS workshop series, and we are now planning to continue expanding this one program at a time. Our funding is for the LA homelessness response workforce generally and broadly. So we want to extend this opportunity to city and county agency staff for them to help shape some of these trainings and inform, what is important, what they're seeing staff are struggling with, as well as include their contracted providers in the trainings. And we have a memo in the packages that you have that includes some more information and details on next steps. But we're just going to be sharing this memo more widely with folks to see if there is interest for folks to participate in the next one. And yeah, I hope that the next training opportunity is able to be similar to what we had in the pilot, which was a cross-agency group. And I felt like a lot of the discussions that we had were really illuminating, not only for me as somebody who is newer to the system, but also for other folks who are participating. So, thank you.
Okay, great. That was, I'm all for giving out certificates when people go through workshops. I think that's really important, something to put on your LinkedIn as well. So, and data is so important. And so learning this skill set, I think is a great thing. And so thank you for doing this. Any questions?
No, just thank you. This is really great. And we don't always invest in, people as much as we should because we're just running, on the cycling just back and forth. So thank you. Good investment. And thank you to Hilton. I want to say that publicly. Thank you to Hilton.
Definitely. Okay. Item number 7, Janine, you're back up here.
Janine Lim, Deputy CFO. I am going to give you a verbal report on the progress of our service provider contracts. We have a total of 580 contracts. 59% of those are fully executed. 34% of those are routing for approval or signature. 5% of those are drafting and 2% are not started.
Could you say that again?
59% of all contracts. 34% are routing for approval or signature. 5% are drafting. 2% are not started.
Tell us why the 2%, why those haven't been started. What's the?
I can give you more disaggregated data about those. I believe that they've all been in some level of drafted, or there are new allocations that haven't been initiated yet. There's 12 of those.
I'd be interested just in getting some feedback before our commission meeting next week of where those,
For sure.
particularly those 12.
Like what's stopping them from getting started?
Yeah. I believe they might all be one service provider, but I don't want to speak too soon.
Okay.
For the county, we have a total of 343 contracts. 67% of those are executed. 31% of those are routing for approval or signature. 1% are drafting. On the city side, we have 166 contracts. 46% of those are executed. 36% of those are routing for approval or signature. 11% of those are drafted. 8% of those are not started. I believe the reason for that 8% are these are amendments that need to be added to executed contracts.
Okay, can you just let us know at the commission meeting
Yes,
on that as well? Is that it?
that's it.
Okay. I think just if you follow up for the commission meeting on those 2 issues, that would be great, Janine.
Sure, no problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's move on to item number 8, update on TLS ramp down.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Kinslow. I'm the Associate Director over Permanent Housing, specifically overseeing time limit subsidies. For our ramp down, we currently have 3,878 participants that are enrolled in programs that have a ramp down goal. Specifically, those are our adult and family TLS programs. And that is not to say all 3,878 people need to be ramped down. That's just who's currently enrolled in those programs. And so the following data will be based off of those programs that I'm providing. Within those programs, we have 536 people that are matched to PSH resources. As Nathaniel mentioned, we have a new COC resource that we've been actively matching to. So we're seeing that number to continually increase as we're matching more participants to that resource. And those people are ultimately a part of that ramp down goal. And we'll be using that resource to ultimately transition out of TLS and ramp down out of that program. To make sure that we are meeting that goal, we've been meeting weekly with DHS and LASA to create goals for that ramp down, make sure that participants are exiting to an appropriate resource and participants are not exiting to a non-permanent housing solution. We've actually had a meeting recently on September 30th to all TLS providers to make sure that we are not exiting anyone to non-permanent housing solutions. And then we actually have 56 people that are occupying, according to our data, that are occupying a PSH resource and TLS. Through our data analysis, we're learning that a lot of this is just data error, that participants are not using 2 resources at once, but that is a part of our ramp down goal to make sure that everyone's using every single resource and the data is clear. We're also working to transition participants that have an encampment flag in HMIS that are a part of our encampment resolution projects, which are Inside Safe and Pathway Home. We are mainly transitioning participants from Inside Safe over to our Sonofo program. And we have 97 participants that we're working to still transition over to the appropriate resource for Sonofo. Specifically, we're focusing on participants that have less than 18 months of rental assistance because Sonofo resources don't allow more than 24 months of rental assistance. So we don't want to put anyone in a position where they'll need to be exited prematurely. We still have a large amount of people that are in need of PSH resources. We're looking at about 1,400 people have housing acuity index that need a PSH resource but have not yet been matched to that resource. Through active system management, we're working through the data, as Camila mentioned, to be able to understand where are in the program. A lot of that includes regular assessments through the housing acuity index. Our KPI requires every 90 days an assessment. And so we're encouraging providers to make sure that those assessments are being completed regularly. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with the TLS leadership to discuss this as well, because we have some barriers that we're experiencing as well with completing the PSH applications. As I mentioned, we have a large amount of people that are matched and have not leased up with those units yet. What we are doing to accomplish that and encourage participants and providers to lease up is we have a memo that was executed on September 19th in collaboration between the city, county, and LASA, encouraging participants to lease up with their voucher within 60 days. Ideally, participants should be leasing up in their current unit so that we can lease quickly. And I believe that's the general update, but I'm happy to take questions.
If I may make just one comment, just in hearing the verbal, I think it would be valuable if next time we can bring back. We have, thanks to our data analytics department, we have comprehensive dashboards that can show us all of this data and that we can be tracking progress cumulatively as well as by agency. So we could, I think next month we could bring a couple of slides from that just so that you can see exactly what those look like and what the data that's visible to our program, the program management teams at the agencies and that we're using to track their progress. So just wanted to add that.
Yes,
Yeah, great presentation. Yeah, the visuals would be great too.
Sure.
Thank you.
of course.
I think for me, the question is that, and this data may be included in that, which is how long are they staying in the TLS? You know, I know they're 2 years, but the whole idea again is throughput. So that would be helpful to say. And again, and we know that it takes a long time for someone not only to be able to be ready to be housed and have the resources or be eligible for the other kinds of things, but those are the kind of issues I think that would be useful as we're looking at prioritization of funding in the future.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, and so item number 9, do we have any commissioner updates or any agenda requests for future meetings? And I want to welcome our Commissioner Gruhl to our committee here. You bring a lot of insights to us. No.
Great question.
They are great questions.
I just wanted to say good morning, everyone. Sorry for being late. You know, LA is an hour away from LA, but I appreciate y'all.
Okay,
I'm
and
going to
we
steal that
have-
phrase. I'm going to steal that phrase. I haven't heard that one.
We do have one general public comment. Mr. Jonathan Kumar?
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for your leadership and for opening this forum. Jonathan Kumar, I founded Samaritan. Good to see you again, Commissioner Graves.
I thought I recognized you.
Yeah. When you don't have stability, it's really hard to achieve stability. When you're not sleeping, it is just about impossible to take all of the care plan action steps and access all of the resources that are going to get you into stable housing and into stable income sooner. And so we have started piloting with California Hospital Medical Center, St. John's Community Center, Eisner Health, to help everyone, Venice Family Clinic, JWCH, UCLA Street Medicine, to deploy a new engagement platform called Samaritan that rewards people experiencing homelessness with direct financial support and social support to help them accelerate their progress into permanent supportive housing. We have data from about 1,000 LA residents over the last couple of years in the medical model, and would love to have a follow-up to talk about how we could increase eligibility from people who are insured by Medi-Cal to anyone on or near the street, regardless of citizenship or Medi-Cal status.
Okay, great. Is there someone that could speak to Jonathan too? And yeah, appreciate it. And your website, people can go to your website as well.
Yep,
So thank you.
Samaritan.city. Yep.
Okay, and with that, I will adjourn our meeting.